The rain drummed against the windows of Marcello's diner like bullets against armor, and Don Salvatore Benedetto sat in his usual corner booth, methodically cutting his veal parmigiana while his mind worked through the evening's business. At 54, he had learned that the most dangerous conversations often happened in the most ordinary places, which was why he preferred conducting certain meetings in this unassuming restaurant. On the edge of Little Italy, the diner was nearly empty at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, just a few late diners and the staff preparing to close. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, unflattering angles that made even innocent faces look guilty of something. "More coffee, sir." The voice was soft, respectful, with the faint accent of someone who had learned English as a second language. Don Benedetto looked up from his plate to find a young woman standing beside his table, coffee pot in hand, her uniform neat despite the long shift that was clearly coming to an end. She was perhaps 22, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and the kind of natural beauty that no amount of makeup could improve. But it was her eyes that caught his attention, deep brown, intelligent, and somehow familiar in a way that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Please," he said, pushing his cup toward her dot as she poured. The sleeve of her uniform rode up slightly, revealing a thin gold bracelet on her wrist. But it wasn't the bracelet that made Don Benedetto's blood turn to ice. It was the ring on her right hand, a simple gold band set with a small emerald, surrounded by tiny diamonds in a pattern he knew as well as his own heartbeat. The ring his grandmother had made for his sister Elena 32 years ago. The ring Elena had been wearing the night she disappeared. "Sir?" The waitress had finished pouring and was looking at him with concern. "Are you all right?" Don Benedetto realized he had been staring, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, his expression frozen in something between recognition and disbelief. "The ring," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. "Where did you get that ring?" The young woman glanced down at her hand, then back at him with obvious confusion. "This? It was my mother's. She gave it to me before her voice trailed off, and she took a small step backward. "Your mother," Don Benedetto repeated, setting down his fork with hands that had begun to tremble slightly. "What was your mother's name?" "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't think that's any of your business." The waitress's tone had grown cooler, more defensive. "Is there anything else you need?" For 40 years, Don Benedetto had been one of the most feared men in New York. He could order death with a gesture, command absolute obedience with a word, and bring grown men to their knees with nothing more than a look. But now, faced with this young woman wearing his sister's ring, he felt as helpless as a child. "Please," he said, and the word came out as barely more than a whisper. "I knew someone who had a ring, exactly like that. Someone very important to me. Someone I lost a long time ago." The waitress studied his face, and Don Benedetto wondered what she saw there. Desperation, probably. Hope, the kind of vulnerability that men in his position couldn't afford to show. "My mother's name was Elena," she said finally, "Elena Rossi. She died 3 months ago." The coffee cup slipped from Don Benedetto's nerveless fingers, shattering against the table and sending hot liquid across his expensive suit. But he didn't notice. The only thing that existed in the world was this young woman standing before him, wearing his sister's ring, carrying his sister's name, Elena. He whispered, "Sir, you're bleeding." The waitress had grabbed a towel and was reaching toward his hand, where a shard of the broken cup had cut across his knuckles. "Your mother," he said, ignoring the blood. "Tell me about your mother." The concern in the young woman's eyes deepened. "I think maybe I should call someone. For you. You seem upset. Was she born in Sicily? Did she ever mention having a brother? Did she speak Italian when she was angry or frightened?" The questions tumbled out of him faster than he could control. The waitress took another step backward, clearly frightened now by the intensity in his voice. "How do you know about Sicily? How do you know she spoke Italian?" Her own voice was barely a whisper now. Don Benedetto reached into his jacket, moving slowly so as not to alarm her further, and withdrew a leather wallet from it. He pulled a photograph so old and creased that the edges had begun to yellow. It showed 2 children, a boy of perhaps 12 and a girl of 10, standing in front of a small house with mountains visible in the background. "Is this your mother?" he asked, holding out the photograph with hands that shook like autumn leaves. The waitress took the picture, her eyes widening as she studied the faces. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same delicate bone structure, the same stubborn tilt of the chin. "Where did you get this?" she demanded. "I'm the boy in the photograph," Don Benedetto said. "The girl is my sister Elena. She disappeared when she was 18, and I've been looking for her ever since." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause, waiting for the world to reorganize itself around this moment of recognition. "You're lying," the waitress said finally, but her voice lacked conviction. "Your mother had a scar on her left shoulder from when she fell out of a tree trying to steal oranges from our neighbor's yard. She was afraid of thunder because our house was struck by lightning when she was 7. She could make pasta sauce that would make angels weep, and she sang lullabies in Sicilian that our grandmother taught her." With each detail, the color drained from the young woman's face. Finally, she sank into the booth across from him, the photograph clutched in her trembling hands. "She told me my family was dead," she whispered. "All of them. She said there was no one left in the old country." "There was me," Don Benedetto said. "There was always me." For 32 years, he had wondered what had happened to Elena. For 32 years, he had sent money to investigators, followed false leads, and carried the guilt of failing to protect the only family he had left in the world. Now, sitting across from this beautiful young woman who had Elena's eyes and Elena's ring, he finally understood. His sister hadn't died or been kidnapped. She had run away, created a new life, and never looked back. The question was why. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sophia." She replied. "Sophia Rossi. Sophia." He repeated it like a prayer. "Your mother, Elena, did she ever tell you about her life before America?" Sophia shook her head. She never talked about the past, said it was better to look forward than backward. But sometimes, when she thought I wasn't listening, she would cry and say names I didn't recognize. "What names?" "Salvatore," Sophia said, and Don Benedetto's heart nearly stopped. She would say Salvatore and cry like her heart was breaking. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 32 years of separation settling between them like fog. Finally, Don Benedetto spoke. "Sophia, I know this is overwhelming. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need you to understand something. Your mother was the most important person in my life. When she disappeared, it nearly destroyed me. If she's truly gone now," he couldn't finish the sentence. Sophia reached across the table and touched his hand gently. "She is gone," she said, softly. "Cancer. But she talked about you, especially near the end. She said she had a brother who would have moved mountains to protect her, but that sometimes protection meant letting people go. She was protecting you," Don Benedetto realized. "From me, from my world." What world? He looked at this innocent young woman, this niece he had never known existed, and felt the weight of all his choices pressing down on him like stones. The world that made it necessary for her to disappear in the first place. 3 days later, Sophia Rossi sat in the living room of her small apartment in Queens, staring at a manila envelope that had been delivered by a man in an expensive suit, who spoke in whispers and avoided eye contact. Inside the envelope were documents that would change everything she thought she knew about her life: birth certificates, immigration records, bank statements, and photographs. Dozens of photographs of her mother as a young woman, laughing and beautiful and surrounded by people Sophia had never seen before. "My God, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "What did you run from?" The answer was written in the careful handwriting of investigators' reports, in newspaper clippings yellowed with age, in police files that should never have been accessible to civilians. Her uncle, the man she'd known only as a customer at the diner, was Don Salvatore Benedetto, head of one of New York's most powerful crime families. And her mother had been his sister, his heir, and the woman who had chosen love over loyalty in a world where such choices could be fatal. Sophia's hands shook as she read the final report in the stack. 32 years ago, Elena Benedetto had been engaged to marry Vincent Torino. son of a rival family, in a union designed to bring peace between two warring factions. Instead, she had fallen in love with a young teacher named Michael Rossi and disappeared 3 days before the wedding. The scandal had nearly started a war. Only Salvador's reputation for controlled violence and strategic thinking had prevented Brooklyn from drowning in blood. A soft knock at her door interrupted her reading. Sophia looked through the peephole to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and an expensive handbag. Clearly not someone from the neighborhood. "Miss Rossi, my name is Catherine Walsh. I work for your uncle. He asked me to check on you." Sophia opened the door cautiously. "He sent you? He thought you might have questions after reading the files. He also thought you might be frightened." "Shouldn't I be frightened? According to these documents, my uncle is a criminal." Catherine stepped into the apartment, moving with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to delicate situations. "Your uncle is many things, Miss Rossi. Criminal is perhaps one of them, but he's also the man who has spent 32 years looking for your mother, who has never stopped hoping she was alive and safe." Sophia gestured toward the couch, and Catherine sat down with careful grace. "Tell me about my mother," Sophia said. "Tell me about who she really was." Elena was extraordinary, beautiful, intelligent, fierce when she needed to be, but also gentle. She could have ruled an empire if she'd chosen to stay, but she chose love instead. "She chose you," Catherine corrected. "She was already pregnant when she disappeared. Your father never knew you existed, and Elena made sure it stayed that way." Sophia's breath caught. "My father died in a car accident when you were 3. Elena never told him about you because she knew that if Salvatore found out about a child, he would never stop looking. The only way to keep you safe was to make sure you didn't exist in his world." If you're captivated by Sophia's discovery of her hidden family legacy, please subscribe to support our storytelling and help cover production costs. That evening, Sophia found herself standing outside Benedetto's restaurant in Little Italy, watching through the window as her uncle conducted what appeared to be a normal business dinner. To anyone else, he looked like a successful restaurateur discussing contracts with associates. But now she could see the subtle signs of power, the way other diners glanced at his table with respect and fear, the careful positioning of his companions, the quiet attentiveness of the staff. He noticed her immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Their eyes met through the glass, and he stood slowly, walking to the door and opening it himself. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I hoped you would come. I read the files, all of them, including the part about my father." Salvador's expression grew pained. Elena loved him very much. His death nearly destroyed her, but she never told him about me because she knew what I would do if I found out. "Not to hurt you," he added quickly, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Never to hurt you, but to take you, to raise you in this world, to make you part of this life whether you wanted it or not." Sophia stepped inside the restaurant, and Salvatore gestured to a quiet table away from his business associates. "She was protecting me from you," Sophia said as they sat down. "Yes, and she was right to do so. Were you angry when you found out?" Salvatore was quiet for a long moment, his hands clasped in front of him on the white tablecloth. "I was angry for 32 years, angry at Elena for leaving, angry at myself for driving her away, angry at a world that made it necessary for her to choose between family and love. And now I'm grateful, because she gave me the most precious gift I could ever receive. She gave me you." Sophia studied his face, searching for deception or manipulation. What she found instead was a grief so profound it took her breath away. "Uncle Salvatore, you don't have to call me that. You don't owe me anything, Sophia. I failed your mother when she needed me most. I won't make the same mistake with you." "What do you mean?" "I mean the choice is yours. If you want to walk away, to pretend this conversation never happened, I'll make sure you're safe and protected, but otherwise leave you alone. If you want to know more, to be part of this family, then we'll figure out how to make that work." Sophia looked around the restaurant, at the quiet elegance and careful order that masked something far more complex and dangerous. "If I choose to stay, to be part of this family, what would that mean?" "It would mean you'd be under my protection, which is considerable. It would mean you'd never want for anything material. It would also mean you'd be connected to a world that your mother spent her life trying to escape. And if I choose to leave, then you continue your life exactly as it was, with the knowledge that you have family who cares about you, but respects your decision to stay separate from our world." Sophia was quiet for several minutes, thinking about her mother's choices, about love and loyalty and the prices people paid for both. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Anything. Do you regret it? The life you've chosen, the things you've had to do?" Salvador's smile was sad and tired. "Every day. But regret is a luxury men like me can't afford for very long. The question isn't whether I regret my choices. The question is whether I can live with them. And can you?" "I could, as long as I thought Elena was alive somewhere, safe and happy. Now that I know she's gone, I'm not sure what comes next." Sophia reached across the table and took his hands in hers, noting the scars on his knuckles, the calluses that spoke of a youth spent working with his hands before he'd learned to work with his mind. "What comes next," she said quietly, "is that you teach me about my mother, about my family, about the woman I never really knew. And after that, we figure out how to honor her memory while building something she would have been proud of." For the first time since Elena's disappearance 32 years ago, Don Salvatore Benedetto allowed himself to hope that the future might hold something other than regret and solitude. 6 months after their first meeting, Sophia Rossi had learned that inheriting a crime family was rather like inheriting a small country, with invisible borders and unwritten laws. She spent her mornings taking business classes at NYU, her afternoons learning the legitimate operations of Benedetto Enterprises, and her evenings discovering that her uncle was far more complex than either his reputation or his rap sheet suggested. "The community center in Red Hook needs a new roof," she told him over dinner at his private table in the restaurant's back room. "Mrs. Chen says the city won't approve funding for another 6 months, but the kids can't use the gymnasium when it rains." Salvatore cut his osso buco with careful precision, but Sophia had learned to read the subtle signs of his attention, the slight pause in his movements, the way his eyes focused more intently on his plate. "How much?" he asked. 30,000. "But Uncle Sal, that's not why I'm telling you." He looked up from his dinner, one eyebrow raised in the expression she'd inherited from their shared genes. "Mrs. Chen's grandson Tony has been hanging around with some older boys from the Castellano crew. She's worried he's going to get recruited, and you think a new roof will solve that problem. I think showing the community that someone cares about their kids might give Tony and boys like him better options than running drugs for the Castellanos." Salvatore leaned back in his chair, studying her face with the intensity that made most people uncomfortable. But Sophia had learned not to flinch under that gaze. "You're thinking like Elena," he said finally. "Is that good or bad? It's dangerous. Elena always believed she could save everyone. That impulse got her into trouble more than once. But she did save someone. She saved me, by running away, by choosing exile over engagement." Sophia set down her fork and looked directly at her uncle. "Maybe running away was the right choice for her, but I'm not her. And this isn't 32 years ago. What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we find a way to use your influence for something other than intimidation and profit, that we build something in this community that gives kids like Tony better choices than crime or desperation." Salvatore was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting thoughts Sophia couldn't read. "Do you understand what you're asking? To use family resources for charity work? I'm asking you to use family resources to invest in the future. Your future, my future. The future of a neighborhood that's been good to us. The other families won't understand. They'll see it as weakness. Let them. They'll learn the difference between weakness and strength when our territory is the safest, most prosperous in Brooklyn." That night, Sophia found herself walking through the streets of Little Italy with 2 of her uncle's men, trailing discreetly behind her. It had taken months to get used to the constant protection, the way conversations stopped when she entered rooms, the mixture of respect and fear in people's eyes when they realized who she was. But she had also learned to appreciate the responsibility that came with the name Benedetto, the way shop owners brought their problems to her uncle because they knew he could solve them. The fact that women could walk safely through their neighborhood at night because everyone knew the consequences of causing trouble on Benedetto territory. Power, she was beginning to understand, was neither inherently good nor evil. It was a tool, and like any tool, its morality depended entirely on how it was used. Miss Sophia? She turned to find Tony Chen standing in the doorway of his grandmother's shop, his thin shoulders hunched against the October cold. "Hello, Tony. How's school?" "It's okay. Listen, I heard about the community center, about the roof." Sophia studied the boy's face. At 15, he had the kind of sharp intelligence that could either build a future or destroy it, depending on which path he chose. "Your grandmother is worried about you," she said gently. "I know. But the thing is, those older guys, they've got money, they've got respect. They don't have to work in their grandmother's shop every day after school. And you think working for the Castellanos will get you those things?" Tony's expression grew defensive. "It's not like I have a lot of other options." Sophia reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. "Actually, you do. I need someone smart, reliable, and trustworthy to help me with a new project. Someone who knows the neighborhood and understands what kids your age really need." "What kind of project?" "The kind that might give boys like you better options than running drugs or working in your grandmother's shop." Tony took the card, his eyes widening as he read it. "Benedetto Community Development. You want me to work for your uncle. I want you to work for me. To help me build something that matters. Something that will still be here long after the drug dealers and the gangsters have moved on to other neighborhoods." "What about the Castellanos?" "They're not going to be happy if I turn them down. Let me worry about the Castellanos." 2 weeks later, the community center in Red Hook had a new roof, and Tony Chen had a part-time job coordinating after-school programs for at-risk youth. More importantly, 3 other boys who had been approached by Castellano recruiters had decided that college preparatory programs sounded more interesting than criminal apprenticeships. "You realize what you've done," Salvatore told Sophia as they reviewed the latest reports from their various enterprises. "You've started a war without firing a shot. I've started a conversation. There's a difference. The Castellanos are losing potential recruits to your programs. Vincent Castellano has been asking questions about our operations, about you specifically." Sophia felt a familiar chill at the mention of Vincent's name. Even 32 years later, he remained dangerous, vindictive, and capable of holding grudges that other men would have forgotten. "Let him ask questions. What we're doing is legal, beneficial, and smart business. And what happens when legal, beneficial, and smart business threatens his illegal, destructive, and stupid business? Then we demonstrate that our way is stronger than his way." That evening brought the test Sophia had been both expecting and dreading. Vincent Castellano arrived at the restaurant with 2 bodyguards, and the kind of barely controlled rage that made smart people leave the room quickly. Sophia watched from the kitchen as her uncle greeted his visitor with perfect courtesy, seating him at the same table where they had conducted business for 20 years. "I hear your niece has been making friends in Red Hook," Vincent said without preamble. "Sophia has been working on community development projects, legal, charitable work. Charitable work that's costing me recruits. If your recruitment depends on desperation and lack of alternatives, perhaps you should reconsider your methods." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sophia could see the bodyguards tensing, hands moving toward weapons they hoped they wouldn't need to use. "Careful, Salvatore. Your sister thought she could change the world too. Look how that worked out for her." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the kitchen staff stopped moving, sensing the danger that had suddenly filled the air like smoke. When Salvatore finally spoke, his voice was soft as silk and twice as deadly. "Vincent, you have exactly 30 seconds to apologize for that comment before I remind you why speaking ill of the dead is considered poor manners in our world." "I'm not apologizing for stating facts." "Then let me state some facts for you. My niece is building something positive in this community, something that benefits everyone, including you. If you're too stupid to see the value in having fewer desperate kids, willing to risk their lives for small money, that's your problem, not mine. And if I decide to make it your problem, Salvatore stood slowly, his movement causing every person in the restaurant to pay attention whether they wanted to or not. Then you'll learn the difference between threatening a man's business and threatening his family. The meeting ended without violence, but everyone present understood that lines had been drawn. Sophia had inherited more than her mother's ring and her uncle's protection. She had inherited a war that had been waiting 32 years to begin. But as she watched her uncle escort Vincent Castellano to the door with deadly courtesy, Sophia realized something that surprised her. She wasn't afraid. She was ready, because sometimes the best way to honor the dead wasn't to avoid their battles, it was to finish them. Thank you for following Sophia's powerful journey of discovering her legacy and choosing to transform it. If you enjoyed this story of family, choice, and finding strength in unexpected places, please subscribe to help support our production efforts and bring you more compelling tales like this.